video of the pulsating biology, and we are starting the new chapter today, that is the diffusion and the osmosis of 5090 Olevels Biology, the section 3.1. This is the chapter number 3 in the Olevels Biology. Before we start the video and the chapter, first we'll have a look at the syllabus first. I usually suggest in every video that the students must have their hard copy or a soft copy of the syllabus. So there are a total of 6 to 9 pointers of the diffusion and osmosis. There is a chapter number 3, movement into and out of the cell. So the number one pointer says describe the role of water as a solvent in organism with reference to the digestion, excretion, and the transport. So the three of the phenomena are being asked to be discussed. There is the digestion, excretion, and the transport. Majorly, the word transport is linked with the term diffusion and the osmosis. So we will be discussing each of them in detail. The second point is says understand that the energy for diffusion and osmosis comes from the kinetic energy of a random movement of molecules and the ion. How the movement of molecule is related to the kinetic energy of the molecules, we need to discuss that. The third point is says understand diffusion as the net movement of molecules from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration down the concentration gradient as a result of their random movement. This is basically the definition of diffusion. We need to discuss since the transport, we have different phenomena that includes the diffusion and the osmosis as well. So we will be discussing this also, and then we have the investigation processes that are related to the diffusion in the other pointers. Let's start with the basic that says how the term or the chapter name, that is the transport, is basically beginning from where. So, the basic of the word transport comes from of water or any liquid molecule. Since without the liquid molecule, the transport cannot take place. So the transport cannot take place without the liquid molecule, and we say for that that the water is a polar molecule. Now, what is meant by the term polar? Polar means anything that have or any molecule that have the charges. There are two charges, one is a positive one and one is a negative one. Whenever any molecule has these two charges, let's say, well, let's take an example of sodium chloride, that is Na and the Cl. So in Na we have the positive charge, where in Cl we have the negative charge. So we say that this is a polar molecule. Whenever there is a disparity of charges in a substance, we say that they are a polar molecule. Similarly, water. The formula for water is H2O. That means each of them, the two molecules of hydrogen and one molecule of water, would be having a disparity of charges. That's where they are termed to be a polar molecule. So, in the condition of water, this is the structure of water molecule when it comes to it being a polar. That is, the hydrogen molecule have the positive charges, whereas the oxygen molecule have the negative charge. So why water is a polar molecule? The water is polar because oxygen and the hydrogen have different electronegative values. What is meant by electronegative value? It means the number of charges that are present on the outermost shell. This is the structure of water. That means the two hydrogen molecules are basically polarity wise are positive, whereas the oxygen is polarity wise negative. Thus, the two positive charges and the one negative charge makes the water molecule a polar. Let's make another diagram in order to understand it in a better way. What does this diagram represent, except for the fact that there is a polarity? This represents a bent structure. This is a bent structures, and by bent structure means it will be making an angle. The angle is of 104.5 degree. When hydrogens have the positive charges and the oxygen have the negative charges, the water molecule structure is said to be bent and in the degree of 104.5. Why is it so? Because oxygen have two lone pairs that are not interconnected with any of the another molecule. The two lone pairs of the oxygen basically repel each other, and electron gets to bond with the hydrogen atoms. This gives the water molecule a bent state. That is the angle of 104.5. The oxygen side is partially negative charge. The hydrogen side is slightly positive charge. Since the two positive charge and the one negative charge makes the water molecule as the polar molecule. This is how the transport takes place by a water molecule, since it is termed to be as a polar molecule, and because it is a polar molecule, it is also termed to be the universal solvent. How so? We will be discussing it in the next sheet, but the water is termed to be the universal solvent, which means that it accepts most of these solutions universally. It is a polar molecule and it is a universal solvent. Let's discuss that how water is a universal solvent. Alright, so we will be discussing major of 3 pointers that will help us understand that how water is a universal solvent. What is meant by universal solvent? Any solvent that can accept all of the solutions, whether they are acidic, whether they are basic, whether they are neutral, from the universe. And the solvent mean that the type of a liquid or the type of a solvent that is going to be dissolved. So water basically accepts all kinds of solvents, thus it is said to be the universal solvent. One of the most valuable property of water is basically its ability to dissolve. Since it can dissolve most of the solvent, thus it is termed to be the universal solvent. So the ability of water to dissolve substances is very important. Basically, an individual water molecule has a bend shape, like I have told you in the last sheet. It has a bend shape which gives it an angle of almost 104.5, which can also be termed as 105 degree. So it has a bend shape and the angle is 104.5. How does it make a bend shape? The polarity. The polar molecule of the hydrogen being positive, the polar molecule of another hydrogen, and this being a negative charge. The hydrogen atoms basically pull it towards downward, making it a very bent shape. So it is approximately above 105 degree or 104.5. Water is polar, thus having a positive and the negative partial end. Since this is the partial positive charge and this is the partial negative charge, the third quality of it being a universal solvent is the partial charges. Hydrogens being positive charge and oxygens being negative charge makes it a universal solvent. These are the basic three qualities that makes water a universal solvent. Its ability to dissolve. It has a bent structure and has an angle of 104.5, and the partial charges that it has, either it is a positive charge or the negative charge, that also make this a polar molecule. These are some of the qualities that makes the water as a universal solvent. The last thing that we will be discussing is water as a solvent. So water as a solvent has the 4 pointers. That number one pointer says that dissolves most organic and inorganic substances. As if water is an organic solvent, that it means that it can dissolve most of the kinds of the substances. It can dissolve organic as well as the inorganic substances in itself. The second point is says it is needed for all the biochemical reaction. The biochemical reaction means in which there is a breaking and making processes that are taking place, breaking and the making processes that are making place simultaneously in the body or in any other features that we require the water. The third point says remove excretory products such as urea and excesses of salts. So along with the water, sometimes with the particles of urea and excessive salts also secrete out. Thus, water play a very important role in this also. Number 4 pointer says in plants, root hair absorb mineral salts present in the soil in solution form. So the root hair are basically the structures of the plant that are responsible for absorbing the minerals and the water from the root. So they are present in the soil in the solution form. Thus, it means that a water also acts as a solvent for the plants. So these are the 4 important pointers due to which we can say that water acts as a solvent.